And so if you remember back to the beginning of the lecture, we said that one of the cross-cultural functions of a family is actually to manage the wealth of the members. And so managing it individually or managing it as a group. Remember last week when we were talking about economics and value and wealth, we said that it can be more than just currency or money. So wealth of a family is the same way, and it can include resources, things like reproductive capacity, and then inheritance down the line when a member dies. So you can control all of these things through the family unit. And so some of the ways we want to just talk about briefly are when a couple is married. So when you're claiming a bride or you are getting married, there's some loss to the woman's family. So in a lot of non-industrial societies, women are providing a lot of the labor force. So that starts in her natal unit, the family she's born into. But she's providing a lot of the labor in terms of keeping the family up and running. And so when she becomes married, she goes and provides that same labor and same service to now her family, which is her and her husband, and no longer her natal unit. And so this can be seen as a loss in a form of labor or a valuable component of the family unit. Okay, because now she's gone from that equation, and so the family has to make up that labor somehow. And so in this case, families are often compensated with what's called a bride price, and this is exchanging of gifts or money to compensate for the loss of the woman and her reproductive or productive abilities in the family. Okay, this is one way we're controlling that wealth. So a couple examples of a bride price. In Zulu tribes, they're patrilineal, but your bride price is paid with cattle. Okay, and so when a man and a woman, or a man decides who he would like to marry, the relatives of the family who are male begin to start negotiating with her family. And so they're spending time together, they're figuring out what is fair, they're figuring out how they're going to make this exchange, the number of cattle, and things of that nature. And so the initial portion of the gift is given on the wedding day, and then throughout the marriage, the cattle continue to be given as gifts. And so if you want to think about this as an extended purpose beyond replacing the labor or making up for the loss of the woman in her natal family, it's also creating these very strong relationships between her family and his family, between the bride and the groom. Okay, because they're engaging in these negotiations, these very kind of close relationships start to form. And so the bride price doesn't just replace the loss of the woman, it's also creating a much stronger community and a much more tightly knit community. And so the government looked at this and saw this time spent preparing for the bride price as time wasted that might be better spent working in the mines and earning a living in a monetary sense. And so they put this limit on a bride price at 11 cattle. And so what happened was this disrupted this normal pattern of negotiation and reciprocity and exchange, and it damaged the relationships and it damaged the strength of the community. Okay. Bride wealth or bride prices can take a lot of different forms. So the example here is obviously cattle, but it can be a lot different than that. It can include things like wild game. It can include other types of animals or shells, anything that holds value in the community. And sometimes that's even the man taking over his wife's place in the family in terms of labor. And so there's a period of time where he joins the family and he is helping with the transition, and he's providing some labor for that family. Another very common example is the dowry. And this is a large sum of money or gifts given to the daughter to ensure her well-being in her husband's family. So the difference here is in process and in form. Okay, so with the bride price, right, we're giving money or valuable objects to the bride's family as she's leaving to kind of replace her labor or value in that family in a way. Okay. A dowry, on the other hand, the money or gifts are given to the bride to ensure that she is well off in her new family, within her husband's family. So there's a difference in how the actual process occurs and then the purpose behind it. Unfortunately, dowry abuse can be kind of dangerous for women. It's actually been illegal since '61, But as we've talked about, laws don't always dictate what happens on the ground. You can tell people what they're supposed to do, but there's going to be some deviation from that. There's going to be some rule breaking, obviously. So in recent years, we're starting to see incidences of abuse of the dowry, or what are called dowry deaths. And basically, the husband's family is holding the wives in ransom to get more dowry from her family. So saying, I'm going to kill her unless you continue to provide us or me with the dowry. And in some cases, actually going as far as to kill the woman and go fulfill this threat. And so this process, while serving a social function, can also be damaging in other ways, just like a lot of practices in a lot of different cultures, including our own. This isn't limited to countries like India or places where they practice dowry or bride price. It can happen anywhere in the world, this type of abuse of a social contract in one way or another. Another way that a family can actually control the wealth and power is through inheritance or passing on of wealth once a family member dies. Okay, so inheritance, the function of that really is to keep the wealth within the family group, as opposed to having it disperse when a member dies. And we've gone as far in Western society as to actually make laws about inheritance. Okay, in non-industrialized societies, there are some specific inheritance rules. So inheritance can be in terms of land, livestock, food, or any kind of local valuable, anything that holds value in that specific culture. And then in any society, inheritance tends to go to legitimate heirs. Okay, most of the time, these are going to be children of a socially recognized married couple. Okay, so you might hear about a child born out of wedlock who is no longer in line for the inheritance, or there's a married couple who has legitimate children and then the father has a child with another woman. That's not a legitimate child coming from a legitimate marriage, and thus that child is left out of the inheritance. Okay, so if we're going to use marriage as a basis for family and inheritance, so we need to know what marriage is. So that's what we're going to talk about next.